Greetings and welcome back to another edition of the Weekend Woo, where we take a look at all things strange, paranormal, and unusual. This is Labor Day weekend 2020. I know a lot of you may have plans to venture out into the great outdoors this weekend, so you will probably find tonight's episode of great importance. But wherever you travel to this weekend, just remember, Granny knows best. It was a Friday afternoon, and the boys had been slamming it all week at the warehouse trying to get to this day. A long weekend of hanging out with their girlfriends and camping down by the lake was in order. Everything was packed into the old hunting truck, and the girls would follow behind with Buddy in his Jeep. So there was Buddy, Will, and Jesse. They'd known each other since before kindergarten, and then Stacy, April, and Nicole, who had probably known each other just as long. They were high school sweethearts, and now, all of them in their 19 and early 20s, they were as thick as thieves. Boys had the boat, the tents, sleeping bags, coolers, fishing poles, everything together. All they needed to do was hit the bait store on the way out of town. It would be a fantastic weekend. Everybody was soon loaded up and ready to hit the road. They had 3 days of fishing, camping, and whatever else tends to happen when 6 young people get together. That was their weekend plan. Dale Hollow Lake, that sits on the border of Kentucky and Tennessee, was their destination. They had a spot on the Kentucky side in Clinton County that was their newfound favorite place to go. It was extremely secluded, had excellent fishing, a perfect spot for the tents and launching the boat, just plenty of room for everybody to roam around and do their thing. They'd been there a few times before, having accidentally found it after getting turned around and lost one Saturday morning. The dirt road leading back to the spot was marked with an old camping trailer that someone had for a deer camp in the fall. Other than that, there never really seemed to be much other human activity whenever they were back there. They would soon realize the reason for that. After they arrived, they had about 2 hours of light left. So it was busy work getting everything put together, collecting the firewood, and getting settled in for the first night. Most of the evening was spent just hanging by the campfire, roasting hot dogs, telling tall tales and gossip, diving into the cooler once in a while for a little liquid sunshine. It was perfect in every way. Kentucky kids doing what they do on a warm Kentucky night. Well, the morning sun brought the boys rolling out as they started getting ready for the day of fishing. All 3 boys were going to go fish while the girls took the Jeep back to that little quick stop. It's a little market, bait shop, had a single gas pump, and sold drinks and ice. They were going to get some of the other items needed for the rest of their stay. When they went in, the old grandma behind the counter was warm and friendly, and after a few minutes of small talk, she asked, "Where are you girls camping at?" And the girls said about 6 miles down past that old camping trailer at the dirt lane. Well, Granny's face kind of wrinkled up with a deep look of concern. She said those Reynolds boys had that camper, went deer hunting down there 6 years ago, and they never come out. They found their truck and their belongings, but no sign of them boys anywhere. Folks hear and see awful strange things coming out of that area, so y'all just be double careful, okay? Matter of fact, might even be best to move down to the big camping area where everybody else is at. Well, the girls nodded politely as they headed out to the Jeep, not really taking in the depth of what Granny had just said, but, you know, kids will be kids. Later, back at the camp, the boys returned with a great catch for the day, and they got to work cleaning their fish and packing it on ice. A fine fish dinner for everyone tonight, a little music, a little fun, and they all ended up going skinny dipping together in the lake. When they got back to shore, they realized all their clothes were gone. Everything except for a pair of flip-flops that were laying up on a rock. Will streaked back to camp and found some shorts. He put those on and then grabbed some towels and whatever else he could find, carried him back to the rest of the gang. Needless to say, they were a little freaked out and more than a little angry that someone had invaded their festivities. Nicole said that at one point she thought she heard something in the bushes, but brushed it off as maybe a raccoon looking for a fish dinner. When they brought the lantern back a few minutes later to look for their clothes, they saw some really strange footprints, about the size of a young person, except they only had 4 toes. They couldn't find their clothes anywhere. When they got back to camp, Will pulled his Remington 870 from behind the seat of the truck, along with a handful of light bird shot. Him thinking that they had a person playing bad jokes on them. He knew he'd pepper their rear end if they came back around. About 30 minutes went by and they could hear crash, crash, crash through the brush, followed by an eerie squall. Boom! Will fired in the direction and everything went silent. After another hour and nothing else being heard, they relaxed a little bit and started back up with their music and having fun. Another 45 minutes passed by when Will had to go find a tree. When he walked past the tent and the tree where his shotgun was leaning at, it was nowhere to be seen. Things start to get a little lively at this point. They hear whispers and shadows, movement in the dark, sticks crunching underfoot. But it's coming from several directions at the same time. Actually sounds like a small group of children running around through the brush. And the girls are starting to get totally freaked out at this point and they want to leave. But the guys, they insist they can handle themselves against a bunch of punk kids. They're just somebody playing practical jokes on us. Take it easy. We'll be alright. That's about the time some small rocks came flying out of nowhere, about the size of golf balls from 5 different places. The girls started running to the Jeep, but when they got there, it was obvious that the 2 tires on the front were completely flat. They looked over toward the truck and they saw that all of its tires were flat. Through the tears and the fear and some lively words being yelled out across the field toward the intruders, the girls ran back over and climbed in the biggest tent they could find, huddled up all together. The boys, they grabbed whatever they could find for clubs and stood guard around the tent, occasionally being pelted by a flying rock coming out of the darkness. Then the sounds turned into screeching howls, and the rocks became even larger. Buddy got hit in the head so hard that it knocked him over. That's when they all retreated inside the tent where the very traumatized girls were hunkering down. The next 4 hours until daylight was a living hell. Screams and shrill howls, large rocks and limbs being thrown at the tent from every direction. They could hear everything around the camp being smashed and trashed and upended. When it went quiet for a few minutes, Will peeked out to see what he could see. The description was horrifying. He came back into the tent with a look of death on his face. He told the others they're about 3 foot tall. They've got long arms and claws on their hands. Their eyes are yellow, glowing like butter in the dark. Skin kind of looks like a dead shade of gray. You could see sores all over them. But man, those teeth. Oh man, it's like looking into the jaws of a piranha. The howls and the assault continued until daylight. The boys and the girls all huddled down inside the tattered and shattered tent, just praying that daylight would get here quicker. When the first tiny rays of daylight did make their way through the treetops, everything went dead quiet. They waited, quietly, another 15 minutes. And one by one they crawled out of the battered tent. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The boat was upside down and half sunk. The coolers and camping gear torn apart and thrown everywhere. All the fishing poles were either broke or gone into the lake. And there sat the Jeep and the poor old truck. All the tires flat, windows shattered, claw marks from one end to another, and the stuffing ripped out of all the seats. After viewing all of this, they started a very, very brisk walk up the old dirt road for 1.5 miles until they reached the corner. There sat the camper, completely ripped apart, with all of its insides on the outside. Fortunately for them, a truck came down the blacktop a few minutes later and carried them down to the old corner store. Granny didn't look too surprised at all when she saw them climb out of the truck bed, weary, battered, terrified, disoriented. Guess that goes to show, when Granny tells you something, you damn well better listen. That's just one of the stories involving these diminutive, malevolent little beings in Kentucky. There's a case of the Kentucky Goblins in the 1950s near Hopkinsville, where 8 people attending a house gathering saw, at first, a strange craft in the sky that looked and appeared like it had crashed. Later, as the night ensued, they were attacked repeatedly by similar little goblin-looking entities. Police reports and several eyewitness accounts of the aftermath by professional and military personnel from Fort Campbell corroborated the eerie strangeness of that event. Then there's the more recent case from the early 2000s in eastern Kentucky near the West Virginia border. The homeowner, looking to have a quiet place out in the country, got anything but that when he got this far. He was repeatedly visited by these same type of creatures, where they were also observed by his young daughter. They appeared as a gray-skinned, bald, small hominid creature. They proceeded to assault the house and the yard almost nightly, taking the family dog never to be seen again, and otherwise creating terror over the course of a long period of time. The sheriff's deputies basically refused to assist unless there was an actual physical assault happening when he'd call. So are these things aliens? Goblins? Some type of ancient remnant from what the Cherokee people called the Wooooo? The entire Appalachian region was once the ancient homeland of the Cherokee civilization, as well as other tribes, for thousands of years before the Scots and the Irish settled into its mountains in the 1700s. The Wooooo are miniature beings described in ancient Cherokee lore as something being between spirits and diminutive humanoids about 2 or 3 feet tall. According to their legend, these beings may have different types of appearances and may be 3 or 4 different types spread over the region. Descriptions of them range from kindly and mischievous to extreme malevolent tricksters. They reportedly have the power to confuse human minds, turn invisible at will, and mimic the sound of human voices to draw you into the forest. They are considered cave or underground dwellers and are nocturnal, wreaking their havoc at night and retreating back to the underground at the first glimpse of daylight. So, are these little people known to the Cherokee also related to UFOs, interdimensional beings, or some other unusual cryptid phenomena? Or are they little imps or demons? North American legends place these types of beings from one end of the country to the other. They are out there, and they are real. So, if you're heading out to your favorite camping or wilderness area this weekend, just remember Granny and pay damn good attention. Well, that concludes our episode of the Weekend Woo. I hope you enjoyed the story tonight. Be safe, be alert, and be back next week. Good night.